Hi, I want to make a video on the life and mechanism of a parasite, and I guess in this video I want to go over mainly how we are parasites and how everything we do relies on using someone else to our own advantage. And in many cases, that's the way the mechanism works, unfortunately, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's one of the things, like I've mentioned before, and one of the things, the bedrock of reality, one of the things that we can't really change about reality is the fact that if we're living in a enclosed environment, an environment in general, in any environment, which is enclosed, be it the universe as a whole or even life on Earth, planet Earth, there's an environment where we're forced to interact with other beings, either directly or indirectly. And in many cases, we're interacting directly with the food that we eat, the animals we kill, say for meat. We're directly inhibiting them or interacting with them and causing them and parasiting, leeching off of them literally to use them to satisfy our needs and wants and our desires, what we need to eat. We rely on them to eat. We're directly using them and abusing them in many circumstances. To you, in many ways, it's all abuse to get what we want and get what we need because we're a parasite and that's all we are, and we're leeching off everything in our system to use to our advantage or to our collective advantage. In different levels, collective is a society or something like that, or our individual own self-worth or I mean, really ego gratification, using someone else's psychological well-being to gratify your well-being by making them feel worse than you are, or using them or making them, not giving them as much of a chance, say, and that can be used, psychological abuse in such ways, psychological use and abuse. I guess they rhyme for a reason, right? And then, I mean, in many cases, that's what we're doing. And we're using and abusing the system that which we were forced into to begin with. Like I mentioned before, we were forced into the system against our will because life works no other way. Life works in a way where we can only do so much, and we can only do so much once we're here. And once we're here, we have no choice but to do something. And once we're doing something, it's going to likely get in the way of someone else. It's going to be using them or interacting or parasiting or using something else that could have gone to someone else. But I guess if it's going to someone, right? If the thing that you're using is going to someone, it might as well be someone worth it. It might as well be someone, right? And it's a matter of someone worth it. What is the likely outcome of that person doing something worthwhile or that's going to benefit, sentient life on Earth as a whole later on? What is the ambition or the potential of someone? And it's about doing what's best. And obviously, there's value equations, but the value equation is in a way equal for everyone, and that's where it comes down to the idea of parasiting, because if you're parasiting off of something that wasn't worth crap, it wouldn't be considered much. But obviously, it's synonymous with the fact that everything in this value game is, essentially equal and of. It's an equal value, as close as we can, at least considering not only humans but all sentient creatures. And once you're parasiting off of something, it's, it doesn't matter the value. It's the fact that you're parasiting off of something to begin with. And, even though I did mention value, we are all essentially equal in the way that we all are sentient. We have value. We feel pain. We react. We're reactionary sentient beings that have positive states and negative states, either of mind or physical well-being. And that's what we're fighting. Um, so yes, we're caught up in the game, where we can only do so much to mitigate against the suffering. And since we have to rely on something, like I mentioned, it might as well, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but it might as well be someone worth it or has potential to, say, save the life of a person by giving them the food, because they have more potential to do better for the rest of the sentient welfare life on, say, planet Earth, more than any the other person who's probably likely going to sit around doing nothing but satisfying their own welfare and their well-being more than anything else. And that's kind of pointless and frivolous, and it doesn't seem to be doing anything but continuing the mechanism, because that person wouldn't be doing anything to prevent, deter, or make better for anyone else, except for people, say, in their enclosed circle or something. But generally speaking, it doesn't matter the value of the creature. You're parasiting off of something regardless of the value. If they can feel, you're parasiting. Or if you're taking something away from something that can feel, you're taking away value, or you're being a parasite because that value could have gone somewhere else. And it doesn't matter the value you have or the thing that you're taking the value away from, directly or indirectly. It's the fact that you're parasiting regardless, because there's other things, and we're all parasites. We're all part of the same mechanism feeding on itself in a enclosed environment, and there's only so much we can do about it. If we say we colonized Mars, and you ate something here and that caused something, that interaction we have, say, with Mars would still be affected. It doesn't matter, it's just on this planet. It would be far-reaching. Whatever sentient life there is, even if it were hundreds of light years away, thousands of light years away, to the end of the universe going on, moving forward, and continue it on the continuous expansion. Whenever, if hypothetically speaking, theoretically speaking, it'd still have an effect because it's still in the same enclosed environment. If it exists, it's existing in this environment. If it's existing in this environment, the only way it can exist, it's going to have an effect on something, even if it's on the opposite side of the universe. Even though the effect would be less and far more dissipating, and far fewer effects, it's still going to have an effect. Although it does, more generally speaking, decrease the further away you get. But it's still in the same environment, and the environment is the only environment that exists in this reality is this universe, at least as far as we know. But I think we can all say, reasonably speaking, that we can logically deduct that this is the only universe existing, and any other universe is only a part of this universe as well, that we may hypothetically imagine something that exists beyond, and it's not beyond, it's inside. The same thing, a black hole leading to another dimension or another universe, it's in the same environment, because if it's connected, it's in the same environment. If it can connect to another universe, it's in the same environment, therefore it can have an effect. The end. If it can connect to another dimension, then it's part of the same dimension because it can connect to it. If it can connect to it, it's part of the same continuity, therefore it can have an effect. The end. So yeah, I mean, the life and the mechanism of a parasite is essentially the idea, like I mentioned, is that we're feeding off of each other, and it doesn't matter the value, regardless. It's a mechanism we're forced into against our will, because once we're here, we have to do, and the only doing we're going to be doing is parasiting. And there's only so much we can do to change that, and the only thing that we can do is do our best to try and mitigate against the parasitic mechanism that we're a part of. We're living the life, we're sentient, we're part of the mechanism as well, and not only in and of ourselves, but as a part of the environment and as a collective whole of all the pieces moving around together. And that way we're all moving around, and that's the mechanism as a whole. And our life, sentient beings reacting, is the part where it matters. The value is where the value comes from. The value comes from the fact that we're interacting, and we're the ones feeling. The life part's the thing that means something because it's the thing that holds the value, the sentient life, the experience. And the mechanism is the thing that doesn't matter unless there is a life to experience it. And we're a parasite based on the life that we're living, based on the mechanism that we're a part of. And we're parasiting off of other life once we're a part of the mechanism, and once we're living, we're part of the mechanism. Therefore, life, the mechanism, the parasite, we're all of those things. And we're at least is part of all those things when it comes to the mechanism. So yes, we're all part of the life mechanism, parasite life mechanism. I guess you can call it the parasite life mechanism, because you're living the life, you're part of the mechanism, and you're a parasite, and everyone else is as well because it's part of the mechanism, which is the life parasite. I mean, it can be described that way too, but I think those are good ways of forming the sentence or the idea. It's a very simple idea. It doesn't take much thought to realize if I take something else, if I do this, it's going to affect someone else. It could have happened some other way. Obviously, you can, obviously things are determined, but you have to consider the fact that moving forward, that's only an idea that applies once something's already happened. You're still doing the game and playing your part, reading your script moving forward. It doesn't matter. Determinism and the life parasitic game having an effect on each other, and the idea of a separate outcome doesn't mean anything when you're moving forward. It only means when you're looking back, looking at, oh, that's how it happens. And I can imply in the future of how it's going to happen, but I can only do so much to imply or understand or project on what the future is going to happen. But I can know only to a reasonable extent, based on previous things, how a certain event that can or cannot happen in the future. You can only take away options. You cannot see exactly how atom per atom or even a specific event that's going to happen moving forward. So that doesn't really deter from the idea of a mechanism of knowing how life is moving forward and how things are inevitable. Since because things are inevitable doesn't mean that this game is worth living or has any kind of meaning behind it, and that the parasitic mechanism is just part of the game. There's nothing we can do to avoid it. We can obviously mitigate against the parasitic mechanism as best we can. And that's part of the moving forward, because we're the pieces moving in conjunction with the rest of all these other pieces. And it's up to us as pieces in the mechanism that are going to lay out the deterministic future to lay out the path that means the best for all things, the best, most mitigation, the best, most deterrence, the most prevention of suffering, and the most being outcome for all sentient things. And that's exactly what we're trying to, or at least that's what some people are at least consciously, intentionally trying to accomplish in their life. And it's obviously something that's important, and it has meaning in many ways. It's the matter meaning in the universe. So yes, just because it's deterministic, to go over the idea one more time, doesn't mean that we can't do anything about the mechanism. We can. We're part of the mechanism moving forward, and that mechanism only applies to the past. And we can only do so much to infer or imply, understand what can happen in the future by ways of deduction or, say, understanding. But we can do something to mitigate against this, back to the main point, parasitic mechanism that we're a part of. And it's about making a fairer game, and we can only do so much to make a fairer game. We can only go so far down into the dirt and the clay, to the underground, to change the means in which we can play this game as best as we can, as fair as we can, because we can't make it as fair as possible unless we're marching in lockstep and moving atom per atom exactly the same. But when you reduce it down to that level by photons and how you're moving, you know, the sentient experience, you're feeling every single step of the way, everything moving in lockstep exactly the same way, like an exact duplicate. It's not going to work that way. So obviously we can only do so much to a reasonable extent to, you know, by definition, as you know, as exact as you can be to make this game as fair as possible. And we can only do so much, and it's about doing what we can as best we can to change it as best as we can, as much as we can, to make the game fair and make the parasitic mechanism at least mitigated, or and make it as little parasitic as possible. As little parasitic as possible is the only goal that we can have, and the only thing that we can drive towards. We can only change so much, but don't let the, like they say, the cliche that you hear all the time, don't let the perfect get in the way of the better, or the perfect get in the way of the good, or something that can be considered a better relative position as opposed to where you are now, compared to where you are now. So making the fairness game, using democracy in government, socialism, using forms of legislation to make the game fair for everyone is really the only thing we can do to make the game fairer. Inheritance, things like that, to make the game fairer, make it so that we're not cheating or you know, being assholes and playing this game, and playing it as best as we can, as fair as we can, and not cheating each other as much as we can, and using the game to our advantage, and passing it on our own to our own lineage to make sure that our beings, even though we're all the beings, we're all the same crap, and you know, everything's superficial except your blood, and your blood's pretty much the same as everyone else's. It's just your superficial image and your reflection of, say, your lineage from your parents or whatever it is. That makes you seem to have any more meaning than, say, someone else, even though that's all superficial crap. It's all the same being, and all everything else doesn't mean much of anything, because in the end it doesn't accomplish anything even in and of itself. So yeah, I mean, the basic subject is, yes, there's nothing here that means you know, the parasitic mechanism. We can just do our best to change that as best as we can. So the life, the mechanism of the parasite. Yeah. Let's try our best to change it. Yes, and that's all we can really say. Like I say before, if I have anything else to say on the subject, I can always mention this in another video, about the life, the mechanism being a parasite, how we leech off of others, and how it's impossible in an enclosed environment not to at least take the corn away from someone else that was going to have the corn, or you know, hitting them because you're forced into a situation based on the fact that you're to a certain extent powerless over your situation, even though you have the power to move forward in any way you want, moving forward based on your own will to move forward, or your freeness, or whatever, within the confines, like I said, within the bedrock, above the bedrock of reality. So yes, that's really all we can do, is change so much of this game. Yes. So being forced into a situation where you're forced directly on a person, where you have to, say, stab a person, because you're being held hostage, or where you're um, taking something that could have belonged to someone else. All this has an effect. It doesn't really matter the effect, it's that we're all having an effect. And the cause and effect, the interaction is what we're a part of. The gears moving against our will. Um, because every other interaction, including our interaction of the illusion of our, or whatever you want to call of our choice that we have, not only that is against our will, but the illusion of every other thing interacting with us. Only the awareness is in this thing against our will that we have moving in this vessel that we're in. And that's all we can do to um, do anything, is use this sentient thing that's a part of the mechanism to do our best to change the mechanism. So I guess that's all I have to say. So yes, and until next time, if I have anything else to mention on this subject, I'll mention it again. So thank you, and until next time, bye.